cursed that 10-minute time limit. It's really starting to hack me off. If anybody actually understands how the heck you actually get the 20-minute sort of stuff, I don't know if you have to subscribe or do whatever. I really don't know, but please just drop me a line because anyway. Anywho, yes, we were going into this, and basically. What I wanted to talk about a bit more, it was some disguise in a lot of the other ones. I mentioned that it does actually have a plot point thing, and yes, as does Solomon Kane. I must admit, basically the Some Disguise one, it does actually have an adventure to it, as far as I can tell, but it really is a lot more freeform. And basically, it sort of does give you ideas and hints of when to drop certain adventures in if you need something quick on the fly, really. But here are my thoughts on the plot points as they're written into these books, particularly with Solomon Kane, because I'm about to head into an adventure I made up. This is good for novices, I think, as well. So listen up. Basically, the plot points you'll find in here, the end of chapter 1s are really not too bad. They're really quite good. However, if you're looking for, the actual plot points themselves, the actual mini plot points between these chapters, I wouldn't give them a lot of thought or time of day. Basically, they're short little stories, and the only reason they're there is to inspire you to create adventures of your own. Really, I would really veer away from running any of these. However, that doesn't mean that you can't take and nick from them what you want. As I said, this is a novice tip here. And to be honest with you, absolutely do that. There's no reason you shouldn't. Don't feel guilty about it. And you can come up with some great stuff. I mean, for instance, this session I had 2 weeks ago. My main inspiration was I was looking through the bestiary, and I saw a specific cat demon. Won't go into it any more than that, but anybody who's played Savage Worlds of Solomon Kane will know exactly which one. Though in actual fact, this video and possibly running over a bit into the next one are going to be a bit full of spoilers, because I'm going to describe now the actual adventure I ran with my group. Now, the start of the adventure, I'd looked through this book previously, page 175, The Hunger. Sorry, I know you can't see that, it's a bit pointless. Which references an inn and what happens inside the inn, and then that's it. And it really doesn't give you a huge amount of leeway at all. But again, it's a nice little sort of throw-in. And I did. I threw this in at the start, and I thought, right, I'm going to make a plot point game. I'm going to make a game that sort of, in and of itself, it is a full adventure in... It was a little over a session, this one. This wasn't just a, this one you might have to do a bit of a two-parter with. We actually had a bit of a all-nighter with it. That was good. Anyway, it was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Anyway, but, yeah. Basically, the adventure started off. They're travelling over Dartmoor in Devon. They travel down, they're sort of travelling down a dirt road on their adventures. They've already been contacted by Enlonga with the dreams and whatnot. And they come across a small inn that's quite simply is the Wayside Inn. There are some fields around, there's some obvious signs of human habitation, and there's a little babbling brook just behind the inn, a small river that seems to flow parallel with the road and down there. And being sort of late afternoon and whatnot, sort of actually getting on for late evening, they drop in, need to refresh themselves. They find inside a group of 8 peasants, really, sort of standing around the fire, and a very eager and kindly innkeeper behind the bar, who offers them all a seat. And the characters we have this time, and yeah, I know some of this is crazy, but the group I'm playing with, you're lucky if you get a really good character out of it. They're going to be completely eccentric, and there's nothing I can do about that. You got Kasavir Dara, who is basically, in essence, a sneaky swordsman, but honourable, if a bit of a thief. Don't ask. We've got Avorius, otherwise known as Icebeard the Dread. Yeah, he's a pirate on his road to redemption. We have Professor Godspell. Yes, that is his second name. I can't remember his first one. Who is a professor who believes he has unlocked the power of science, which is basically just an excuse for him to wield magic, which I don't really mind too much, And last but not least, I really can't remember his name. That's pathetic. I should have read the character sheet, so I do apologise. Anyway, we have a woodsman who's basically a child of the woods, sort of raised in harsh conditions, sort of thing, and he basically he's got quirks, and his quirks are that he's naturally intimidating, and he will go around and show you his trophies. You see this duck, which is a duck stuffed with its wings in flight and headless. To get this duck, I jumped 16 feet out of a tree and bit its throat out in midair. And that's the sort of shit we're getting all the time, which means he gets free bennies. So he's really, I really like the character. He's amusing me greatly. So it's all good. But anyway, they go inside this inn, and of course they're greeted quite jovially by the innkeeper. Sit down, have a drink, have something to eat, take a load off, etc., etc. And they inquire about rooms, and he tells them, well, sadly, we can only do singular rooms here, though each has a hearth, and I assure you, it's comfortable and will take the chill off your bones. Very pleasant chap, really. And of course, at this point, Professor Godspell notices, very out of place in this room, there is a scrap of parchment on the wall above the fireplace. He goes over and looks at this. He goes over and sort of admires this thing because, of course, he's got an interest in the workings of magic and whatnot. Though as he looks at the page, the words themselves seem to twist, as if, although he's quite certain they're sort of that they're still, he keeps sort of only being able to see them as if it were on the periphery of his vision. Intrigued, he turns around to the barkeep, which is called, who was called Michael Brent, I believe. Yeah, I was a bit stuck for a name for that one. Called Michael Brent, and he inquires about this. And Michael Brent simply replies, Aye, strange fellow we had in some three and a bit weeks back. Dressed in dark robes he was. Sallow skin, pale, very queer. Jovial enough mind, sort of came in, he rented his room like any good paying customer, and the next morning I found him down by the river, chanting something he was, most peculiar. In the end, I called him out on it, and he turned on me, he did. So I struck him a fist blow. Yeah, he staggered off. No, not before I managed to tear this page out of the book he was holding. No, a trophy, that is. What do you think? Of course, Professor Godspell agrees that it's very good. Yeah, I know I'm a crap actor, but, it's fun at the time. And, yes, and, that's fine. He sort of realises, though, that despite the fact that some parts of it are illegible, it seems to be pointing to the consumption of flesh. Regardless, at this point, the other members of the group have actually asked for food. There's a pot of stew, they assume, simmering over the fire. Unfortunately, at this point, Michael turns around to them and he says, I do apologise. Sadly, we don't have any stew on at the moment. Those are simply some bones that I'd be grinding down, making a stock out of for soup, and the soup's not ready. However, we have bread and cheese. I tell you what. It's because I don't have any food, and I do apologise. A free mug of ale on the house. You might wonder why they hadn't had one already, but they hadn't asked. So if you don't ask, you shall not receive. So they have a mug of ale. At this point, the woodsman himself has got quite bored, and he's actually headed off out to see if he can catch a rabbit for his supper. However, the thief, Godspell himself, is still by the bar at this point. The thief has actually taken a sip of this brew, and suddenly overcome by a wave of dizziness, she all but collapses across the table. And the pirate himself is not feeling too wonderful. At which point the peasants actually, with evil grins flashed around, they pull out wooden clubs from beneath their robes, and they start to bear down the adventurers. And to cut long story short, in the midst of the fight, the actual stew pot itself is knocked over. And to everybody's horror, from the pot is nothing but dismembered hands. And horribly, the stumps begin to bleed into the stock that's actually that's flowed across the floor. These hands begin to twitch, and then they skitter. And then suddenly one lunges for one of the peasants' throats and begins to throttle him. At which point, of course, Michael yells out, "Curse the necromancer! We should have had nothing to do with his kind," etc. You boys shouldn't have egged me on, placing the blame on them, of course. And essentially, at the end of the fight, when the heroes have actually, of course, they actually initially think the hands are after them only. But when the heroes have or as I call them, the Pilgrims of Solomon Kane, which is the name of our overarching thing, when they've actually offed the peasants and the and Michael Brent, who has been possessed by the spirit, by a cannibalistic spirit. I won't name it because that might. Yeah, and he basically, the hands just go lifeless, and yeah, they take the page, and something obviously completely dark and sinister has actually occurred here. And they look in the larder, and indeed there is the remains of human corpses. So all of them were cannibals, and this sort of shakes them. However, they spend the night there. They sort of rest themselves up nicely, and then they continue on their way down this path through Dartmoor to a small village of Dunstan. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because I'm running over, and I'll catch you with the second part of this adventure in just a moment.